2023 was an incredible year for gaming, so much so that there weren't enough hours in a day to possibly get through them all. But for the ones I did manage to stream this year, I've compiled a list of my top 5 standouts. Coming in at number 5 is Alan Wake 2. I was never a huge fan of the first game, feeling that the combat was too one-note and the story was borrowing far too much from Twin Peaks. Alan Wake 2 not only improved on those critiques, but transcended them. The combat now borrows the exact same system from survival horror juggernaut Resident Evil and feels extremely fun to play, with lots of visceral gore and feedback for every shot taken. The real star of the show, though, is the story, which is now a completely insane David Lynch fever dream. While the first game seemed like a knockoff of Twin Peaks, Alan Wake 2 is a much better homage to several concepts, from Twin Peaks to True Detective and even the X-Files. Instead of having a focus on one-to-one versions of Twin Peaks characters like the Log Lady and the Lamp Lady, the story draws from those aforementioned inspirations in its own way, with the end result being something inherently unique. My favorite thing about this game was its unpredictability. While still being serialized into chapters or episodes like the first game, you never have any idea where the story is going to take you. And like any good TV show that just keeps you guessing until you've binged the entire series in a weekend, Alan Wake 2's central mystery is its core to the player's motivation. The game also knows when to add in some brevity. From the Finnish Brothers TV commercials to the heavy metal musical number, there's just an unbelievable amount of creativity and humor to the entire production. It also marks one of James McCaffrey's final performances as FBI agent Alex Casey, with James being best known as the voice actor behind Max Payne. While James passed away this past month, he was an absolute legend and will live on through his performances as one of the most iconic voice actors of all time. So if you've ever wondered what Resident Evil on acid would be like and are a fan of serialized detective noirs, check out Alan Wake 2 for a one-of-a-kind experience you won't soon forget. Reception is fairly split on Lords of the Fallen. You're either going to love it or hate it, and not much in between. My experience with it put me in the former camp, as I enjoyed my time with the Metal Souls-like. I think it really boils down to whether or not you're a fan of Dark Souls 2. This game feels like a modern revamp of the most divisive entry in the Dark Souls series, so your mileage will vary if you've never managed to get through DS2. The best word to describe Lords of the Fallen is ambitious. It is one of the largest open worlds since Elden Ring, but is really 2 maps in one, given every single area has an umbral version of itself, or a Land of the Dead underworld which you can dip into whenever you want or whenever you die initially. Like Dark Souls 2, Lords of the Fallen leans heavily into enemy density, especially in the underworld. While certainly challenging, it does offer a huge variety of customization as far as weapons and armor goes, so for those of you who love to focus on crafting a really specific build, well, this is the game for you. If you're looking for a traditional Souls-like experience with a massive, interconnected open world that will take you over 30 hours to beat, then I do recommend giving this one a shot, as there is a lot of this game to explore here, featuring multiple endings requiring multiple playthroughs if you happen to be one of those non-charity scamming completionists. Developer NeoWiz surprised everybody this year by creating one of the most polished non-FromSoft games ever made. I mean, if you didn't know any better, you'd assume FromSoft themselves were behind this one. Every aspect of the game was elevated above their peers, from the combat, to level design, to the music, to the story. Honestly, it's quite a feat for anybody to make me give a shit about Pinocchio, but NeoWiz made it happen. When it comes to combat, I've always found Souls-like to be something of a rhythm game, where once you find the parry tempo, the game really locks into a groove that makes you want to keep playing. That's absolutely the case with Lies of P, though it's a slightly offbeat tempo you'll need to get used to, as nearly every enemy has a delayed wind-up prior to attack that you'll need to account for. I'd also argue this is the most challenging Souls-like of the year, much more difficult than Lords of the Fallen or anything else of a similar nature. Defeating a boss gives you a massive feeling of accomplishment, and by the end of the game, you'll want to jump right back in with New Game Plus. That's really another major point in favor of this game, the replayability aspect of it. It's designed to take you through at least New Game Plus, and, save for bosses, will feel much easier and take far less time to complete each subsequent run than the initial playthrough. I spent about 2 weeks playing through Lies of P 3 times in order to get through New Game Plus, and can't wait for any DLC or sequels that NeoWiz has in store for us. If you're looking for an extremely challenging Souls-like that's well optimized and with a ton of replayability, look no further than Lies of P. 2D Souls-like Metroidvanias have to be one of my all-time favorite genres of games, mainly because I grew up in the 90s and have a lot of nostalgia for those edgy 16-bit Sega games from yesteryear. So as I was playing through The Last Faith, I couldn't help but think that if this game came out in 1995, it would have been one of the greatest games of all time. Probably has something to do with how the protagonist's character design resembles Gambit from those mid-90s X-Men games. Like Liza P., The Last Faith was another game that I found to be big on replayability. Having played through it 4 times, I just really liked the combat, level design, and atmosphere, as I thought it was a perfect blend of Blasphemous, Bloodborne, and Castlevania. There was even a recent patch that managed to fix my biggest gripe with the game in my review of it, that being the starting classes all started with the same equipment. Now after the patch, they all started with unique equipment, giving some more viability to how you want to start your build. The Last Faith really straddles the line between Souls-like and Metroidvania, far more so than Blasphemous, given the Souls-like leveling system and abundance of attribute-scaling weapons. So if you're looking for a really brutal, gothic, dark fantasy Souls-like, look no further than The Last Faith. I really can't wait for Kumi Souls games to add New Game Plus and any DLC, as I had rather high expectations for this game, and they were exceeded at every level. If you're familiar at all with this channel, then it probably comes as no surprise that Blasphemous 2 was my #1 game of the year. While games like Alan Wake 2 can be considered high art that has been distilled down into a game, the Blasphemous series is then the reciprocal, starting as what appears to be a simple game, which then suddenly reaches transcendence and elevates itself to become high art. Most of that elevation here is credited to the music because, goddamn, both Blasphemous games have some of the best soundtracks in all of gaming. Ever the case in Blasphemous 2, a melancholic and somber waltz greets you in each and every area, perfectly setting the tone for the atmosphere, which is then reinforced by the dark medieval art style and level design. Each area of the game is visually distinct and surreally animated. It feels like you're traversing your way through a Francisco de Goya painting. Blasphemous 2 is simply on a completely other level in the art department compared to most other games. The combat, which was already pretty great in Blasphemous 1, has been overhauled, resulting in extremely smooth controls. Instead of a single weapon, there are now 3, each with their own playstyle and each have their own specific abilities and uses for exploration throughout the world. Bosses are also excellent, though not as difficult as some of the bosses from Blasphemous 1, save for Eterno. Holy hell, I think I'm going to do a stream just focused on that one fight to see how many attempts it takes me to memorize his second phase. The boss is such a hilarious spike in difficulty that it's honestly unbelievable. The other major aspect of this game that I have some thoughts on is the story, which continues from the true ending of Blasphemous 1. A few months ago I made a video discussing why I believe the true ending suggests that Blasphemous is Gnostic allegory, and without spoiling anything for Blasphemous 2, I still believe that's the case for the sequel. As a side note, I'm planning on making another video related to Gnostic themes found in Blasphemous 2, as there's a few major characters as well as the ending which merits further discussion. Overall, Blasphemous 2 is just a fantastic experience to play through and I can't recommend it enough. I had high hopes for this one, and the Game Kitchen really knocked it out of the park. Hopefully we'll get some New Game Plus and DLC soon, as the DLC for Blasphemous 1 was what really kicked it up a notch compared to release. Anyway, those were what I found to be the top 5 games that I streamed over the past year. Let me know what you thought of these games, or what your top 5 were, down in the comments. As the year comes to a close, I hope that you had a good 2023, and that you'll have a better 2024. Take it easy, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.